Welcome back, Lost Again No More. This is episode 4. I kind of wanted to take this time on this episode today to kind of highlight what I think is important if you're going to start vinyl collecting in general, because I think a lot of people are stepping into this new era of collecting. And something I would tell anyone starting out is that the number one thing that you need to consider when buying a vinyl of an album that you like is, was it actually supposed to be put on vinyl in the first place? And I say this as vinyl has a dynamic range that a lot of modern music is being cut for streaming. It's like Spotify and Pandora, all the different streaming networks, and they're not necessarily being cut to sound good on your record player. And in fact, a lot of times I've had friends buy these records and they're like, they sound substantially worse than what they're hearing on the radio and their phones. They're like, why does this sound so bad? And it's like, because it was never meant to be pressed on vinyl in the first place. um, a big thing with that is the technology. By the 90s, a lot of it's called the loudness wars. On the radio, they were trying to have the music that would kick on be louder than the one you heard before, and that compressed a lot of the background instrumentation that was going on, that up until that point you could hear if you listened to a vinyl record, and from like this, let's say about the mid 80s back, you could actually hear differences, separation between drums, bass, guitar, the vocals, and it made a unique experience. Sometimes it actually sounded like you were live in the room. Some people call it like a warmth, but I don't know, because I've read other things where they're like, it's totally in your head. That's not really true, but all I know is that it sounds completely different, especially the albums that come out now, the 21st century albums. A lot of them that people want to have on vinyl, because vinyl's cool to have like this big collectible memento, but I the longer you get into it, the more you actually want the record to sound good. It's not just about collecting and throwing another one up on your shelf. For me, in my long vinyl collecting history, is I think everyone goes through it when you first get into it. I should actually just go back and explain how I got into it in the first place. I was living in New Orleans, and I had a neighbor who was moving back to Germany, and she needed help kind of boxing up stuff. And we got to know each other, and she came over and asked, like, could I help out? And I was like, oh, absolutely. So spent like 2 days helping her get ready for her big move. And we got to these like crates and crates of vinyl. And she was like, well, I don't have any money to pay you, but I really think you should take some of these vinyl. And I was like, well, what the heck am I don't even have a record player. I don't even know what I'm going to do with it. But my parents had a record player, so growing up I was exposed a little bit to it. And then I started seeing some really cool albums in there, and I didn't have any way to reference what they were worth or anything. I just like, this looks like a cool album, I would like to own this. So cut to a couple years later, I got a record player. I'm really into it now, and I went down the same path I think quite a few collectors go down. I started buying new vinyl of classic old albums that I really like, because I couldn't find, like for instance, I have this New York Dolls original press. But back in the day, I wanted to have just the New York Dolls album. So I got the one that was new. I forget exactly which label it was. It's a label you want to avoid. I think it's Plain Recordings, I'm pretty sure. And they were, targeting people like me that really wanted to hear a classic, awesome album. But there's no way I could find this. I didn't have the patience or time to wait until I came across it for a good price. And that's kind of the big thing I wanted to get across in this video, is that you need to have patience, true patience, if you want to have a good sounding record collection. You can go out and buy everything brand new, but I guarantee you're going to come up against somebody who has a older looking record. It even may look scratched up, because sometimes that's deceptive. It's because of the grooves of vinyl. Just because you have these kind of surface markings, it may not actually be a bad recording of it. It may actually sound really, really good, especially if you put it through any sort of cleaner, like I've used before, like a hypersonic cleaner, or one of those wash cleaners that you can, wash it with a saline solution, I believe, and then clean it out. Those can take old grimy records from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, up into the 90s a little bit, because some were made in the 90s, and it can make them sound really, really good, way better than what you're hearing on a radio, because that's just compressed. It just really is. And like I was saying before, by the 90s, most of the albums that were being made were being cut to sound best on CD, because that's what everyone's driving around with and playing on their CD players. So it wasn't even being cut to sound good for vinyl. So then you get to this modern era where, every album that comes out now, I see, from Taylor Swift to even rap artists, they're all being cut on vinyl, but like the dynamic range doesn't sound good. It just straight doesn't sound good. So I would suggest, and part of the reason I made this video is to kind of educate people on things, is you need patience. If you have an album you really, really love and you can't live without, if it's, I'd say, up to like 1992 or 93 and back, you should try to get an original if you can. Or if not, try to make sure that the new recorded album that is coming out, they're trying to sell as a AAA process recording, because that means that it's from the original tapes, it's pressed right, and I really never had a bad issue when I've got a AAA recording of a newer album. Now, if you don't see any of that, it's been taken from digital and pressed onto vinyl, and they're trying to make a buck on you. And you're gonna put it on your plate up there and listen to it, and it's just, you're gonna be underwhelmed. You're flat out gonna be underwhelmed. And I've seen a lot of people get turned off by younger people because they're like, it just sounds worse than when it's coming out of my car speakers. And I spent all this money on, new speakers, a new record player, a new amplifier. Why does my favorite album sound bad? And I've constantly had to explain this to people, because it was never engineered and recorded to sound good on vinyl in the first place. So that's why I would suggest, if you really love, like I do, I love a lot of albums, especially post-punk albums, from punk and post-punk albums from the 70s and early 80s. If you hear them on CD and then hear them in vinyl, it's weird how much better the vinyl sounds over the CD. And then, now you got streaming, so that's even compressing it even more. So if you hear it 3 different ways, it's like the band Clash I was talking about in one of my very first videos. Hey girl, I got my little kittens over here messing around. You hear those first videos that I was talking about, the Clash sound absolutely amazing on vinyl, because they were recording to sound good on vinyl for everyone, all of their fans. And then as CDs come out, there gets a little rush. They take the same tapes and let's just pop it on CD, but it's just not, it's just missing, and you can really tell when and then when you hear it on Pandora or something, I sometimes I'm like, is this even the same band? They literally sound so different. So I wanted to make this video to kind of inform people that are, new new into it, or maybe even were like me after maybe my first 3 or 4 years of getting in. I had all these new albums, new pressings of old albums, and then I would get like, for instance, like David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. You listen to the new ones, you're like, all right, that sounds good, Starman, all that. But then I was fortunate enough over time to find an original. And when I tell you, there was no comparison. I got rid of that new release immediately, and I kept my old release, because that was just, the sound was that much better. So I kind of wanted to put that out there, kind of inform people. It's not to hate on modern albums and stuff. They just probably sound better streaming. They will always sound better streaming, because they are being made for streaming right now. Especially modern rap. I don't think I've encountered one modern rap album, vinyl album, that sounded better than when I've heard it like on YouTube or wherever I hear it stream, even sometimes on the radio, because they're literally being cut for that now. They're not being cut for vinyl. So that's kind of the end of this episode, and I hope that that's kind of informed you a little bit. As you move forward, you can kind of let the cat out of the bag. Basically, you're going to be competing with me for those old used records, but I kind of would like to put you on the right path and to see a lot of these modern represses ending up in the landfill. Because big reason I'm making this video was I had a good friend's kid who had gotten into vinyl, and now they've already sold their setup because they're like, oh, it just sounds so much better on streaming. I'm never going back. And I'm like, well, the stuff that you're listening to, the modern stuff, does sound better on streaming. But you know, you're listening to some of the old things like I got, like when and I hear like this Gladiators. Oh, such a great reggae album. Serious thing. I was so disappointed when I heard the CD version of this at a friend's house compared to what I had. I was like, they had absolutely ripped this band's sound to shreds just to make a quick buck on the CD. And I told him, like, thank God I have it on vinyl, because I would never own that CD. And after I've heard that one so much. So the cat's out of the bag. You're going to be competing with me now for used vinyl, and that's cool. All the other collectors would admit used vinyl is probably the way to go. So I guess I'll see you out there, and happy crate hunting.